The hospital corridor was silent, except for the faint beeping of machines coming from the ICU. A man in his late 30s sat on the cold metal bench outside the door, his eyes tired and filled with pain. His clothes were neat but wrinkled, showing he hadn't been home in days. He was a billionaire, known for his confidence, power, and control, but now all that wealth meant nothing. His little girl, his only daughter, had been in a coma for almost 2 months. Every morning he brought fresh flowers to her room. Every evening he whispered prayers beside her bed, hoping she would open her eyes just once. The doctors said there was little chance left. They had done everything possible. Medicines, surgeries, therapy, nothing worked. She just lay there motionless with a pale face and weak heartbeat. He blamed himself for everything. He had spent years running his business empire and had little time for family. He missed birthdays, school plays, and bedtime stories. Now he sat beside his daughter, wishing for one more chance, just one, to hear her call him Dad again. Outside the hospital, a young homeless girl sat near the gate. She had messy hair, old clothes, and carried a small blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Every day she watched the same man walk into the hospital with flowers in his hand and tears in his eyes. People ignored her as they passed by, but she noticed everything. One evening, as the man left the hospital, the girl spoke softly. "Sir, is your daughter still sick?" He was surprised that a stranger knew about it, but something in her tone felt gentle, not intrusive. He nodded slightly and tried to move on. But she continued, "I can help her." He stopped and looked at her. "Help her?" he repeated with disbelief. "You don't even know her condition." The girl lowered her eyes and said quietly, "Sometimes help doesn't come from doctors or money. Sometimes it comes from the heart." Her words caught him off guard. He wanted to walk away, and she was just a homeless girl. What could she possibly do? But deep down he felt something strange, a flicker of hope he hadn't felt in weeks. That night he couldn't sleep. Her words echoed in his mind. He had seen hundreds of doctors, but none had spoken like that. The next morning, when he went to the hospital, he saw the girl again sitting outside. Without thinking, he walked over to her. "Tell me," he said slowly, "how can you help my daughter?" The girl looked up, her eyes filled with calm confidence. "Let me see her," she said simply. He hesitated. "You can't just walk into the ICU. It's not a place for strangers." She nodded, understanding his concern. "Then let me pray for her from outside," she said softly. "Sometimes prayers travel where people can't go." The man didn't know why, but he allowed it. Maybe he was desperate. Maybe he was tired of hearing the same hopeless answers from the doctors. So he led her to the hospital garden, where she sat cross-legged under a tree and closed her eyes. She didn't ask for money or food. She just whispered something under her breath, her lips moving in silent prayer. For the first time in weeks, the man felt peaceful watching someone else believe, truly believe, that his daughter could be saved. That evening, he went back to the ICU. The nurses were adjusting the machines and the soft beeping continued. He sat beside his daughter, holding her tiny hand. "If you can hear me, sweetheart," he whispered, "Daddy's here. Please wake up." Suddenly, one of the machines made a small sound, not an alarm, but a change in rhythm. The nurse looked up quickly, checking the monitor. "Her brain activity just moved," she said, surprised. "It's weak, but it's movement." He froze. For 2 months, there had been no sign at all. The nurse called the doctor, who rushed in, confused but hopeful. The father's heart pounded in his chest as he stared at the monitor. Was this real? Outside the hospital, the homeless girl slowly opened her eyes and smiled faintly. She didn't know what had happened inside, but somehow she felt it. The shift, the change, the touch of something greater than herself. The father ran out a few minutes later, scanning the area for her. But she was gone. Only the small blanket she used to carry was lying near the gate, neatly folded. He picked it up and looked around, his eyes searching the crowd. "Where are you?" he whispered. He didn't know who she was, or how she knew about his daughter. But one thing was clear. Something had changed that night. Inside the hospital room, his daughter's fingers twitched ever so slightly. The father dropped to his knees and wept silently, realizing that hope had returned in the most unexpected way, through a girl who had nothing, yet gave him everything he needed, faith. The next morning, sunlight streamed softly through the hospital window. The man sat beside his daughter again, but this time something felt different. The doctors confirmed there had been faint signs of brain activity during the night. Not much, but enough to give a little hope. For weeks there had been nothing, and now, this small sign felt like a miracle. He couldn't stop thinking about that homeless girl. Her words, her calm face, and the quiet confidence she had when she said she could help. He didn't even know her name. All he had was her folded blanket, which he still carried in his car as if it were a reminder of that strange night. When he walked outside later that day, he looked for her everywhere, near the hospital gate, the benches, the food stalls. But she was nowhere to be seen. He even asked a security guard, "Did you see a young girl here last night? She sits near the gate wearing old clothes." The guard shook his head. "I didn't see anyone this morning, sir." Maybe she left early. Disappointed, he walked back inside. Still, something inside him whispered that she would return. By evening, as the sun dipped low, he saw her again, sitting quietly under the same tree. She was holding a small cup of tea someone had given her. When she saw him, she smiled gently. "You came back," he said, trying to hide his relief. "I told you I would," she replied. "How is your daughter?" He hesitated. The doctors said, "There's a little improvement. Not much, but something." She smiled wider. That's how healing begins, with something small. He sat down near her, unsure what to say. "Who are you?" he finally asked. "And how did you know she could get better?" The girl looked thoughtful for a moment. "I once knew someone who was very sick too," she said softly. "Everyone gave up on her, but I didn't. I believed she could come back. She did." Her answer was simple, yet carried a depth that touched him. "So you think belief can really change things?" he asked. She nodded. "Belief brings light, and light brings life." Her words sounded almost spiritual, but there was something real about them, something he couldn't explain but could feel. That night, she asked if she could pray again. This time he didn't hesitate. He let her stand outside his daughter's room. Through the small window, she could see the little girl lying motionless on the bed, surrounded by machines. She closed her eyes, placed her hands together, and whispered something so quietly that even he couldn't hear. After a few minutes, she stepped back and smiled faintly. "It will take time," she said, "but she'll wake up." He wanted to believe her. Every part of him wanted to hold on to that hope. "If that happens," he said softly, "I'll make sure you never have to sleep on the streets again." But she shook her head gently. "I don't want anything, sir. I just want her to smile again." He didn't know what to say to that. It had been a long time since someone spoke to him without asking for something in return. Over the next few days, the homeless girl came every evening. She would sit outside, pray, and sometimes tell the man small stories about kindness, patience, and faith. Each time she came, the hospital staff would watch curiously but didn't stop her. Something about her presence brought peace, even to the nurses who worked long hours. On the fourth day, as she prayed quietly, the nurse rushed into the corridor, calling the man's name. "Sir, please come quickly." He ran into the ICU, heart pounding. The doctor was by the bed, his face showing surprise. "Her eyelids, they just moved," the doctor said in disbelief. "It's faint, but she's responding." The man froze in place, tears filling his eyes. He looked at his daughter, her little fingers twitching again, stronger this time. Her heart rate had risen slightly, and the monitor beeped in a steadier rhythm. "It's happening," he whispered, hardly able to breathe.
"She's coming back." The doctor tried to stay cautious.
"Let's not jump too quickly, but yes, it's a very good sign." Outside, the girl sat calmly under the same tree as if she already knew. When the man came out to tell her, she only smiled and said, "See? Her soul heard you." And she heard me too. He was speechless. For weeks, he had been surrounded by machines, medical words and hopeless expressions, but this simple girl, with nothing but faith, had brought back something none of them could give: hope and life. As the evening wind blew, he looked at her and said quietly, "You're not just some homeless girl, are you?" She didn't answer that. Instead, she looked up at the sky and said, "Sometimes people lose everything just to find what really matters." The man didn't fully understand what she meant, but something about her felt different. She wasn't ordinary. She wasn't there by chance. That night, when he returned to the ICU, his daughter's breathing had become stronger. The nurse smiled softly and said, "She's stable now. Maybe she's fighting to come back." Something extraordinary was happening. something beyond science or logic, and deep inside he knew that this was only the beginning. Days turned into weeks, and the change everyone once thought impossible slowly began to happen. The billionaire's daughter was showing signs of waking up. Her fingers twitched, her eyelids fluttered, and sometimes her lips moved slightly, like she was trying to say something. The doctors couldn't explain it clearly. They said her recovery was beyond medical expectation. Every morning the father sat beside her, holding her hand, whispering softly, "Daddy's here. You can open your eyes now, my love." And each evening, he found himself walking to the hospital garden hoping to see the homeless girl again, the mysterious young girl who had given him back his faith. For 3 days she didn't appear. He waited by the same tree where she used to sit, her small blanket still folded neatly on the bench beside him. He asked everyone he could, the guard, the vendors, even the nurses, but no one had seen her. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. Then one cloudy afternoon, as he sat lost in thought, he heard a soft voice behind him. "You look tired." He turned quickly. She was standing there, barefoot, wearing the same simple clothes, her eyes calm and kind. "You came back," he said, his voice full of relief. "I never really left," she said quietly. "Sometimes you just have to wait for the right moment to see what you're meant to see." He frowned a little, confused by her words but too grateful to question them. "My daughter's showing real progress," he said. "The doctors say it's unbelievable." The girl smiled softly. "It's not unbelievable, sir. It's love. She's feeling your love again. And maybe mine too." Her voice carried warmth, the kind that didn't need proof. He wanted to thank her, to do something for her. "Tell me, do you have anyone, family, a place to stay? I can help you." She shook her head. "I had a family once," she whispered, "but they left long ago. I'm used to being on my own." He felt a deep ache in his chest hearing that. "No one should have to be alone," he said quietly. That evening she asked if she could see the girl again, not inside the room, but just from the door. The father agreed. She stood there, eyes closed, her lips moving in silent words. The nurse who saw her said later, "I don't know what it is about that girl, sir, but every time she comes, the room feels lighter." That night, something miraculous happened. Around midnight, the nurse rushed to the father's waiting room, her eyes wide with shock and joy. "Sir, she moved. Her eyes are opening." He ran faster than he had ever run before. Bursting into the ICU, he saw his daughter blinking weakly, her eyes half open, her fingers curling around the bedsheet. The doctor quickly checked her vitals, almost speechless. "She's waking up," he said. "She's really waking up." Tears streamed down the father's face. He knelt beside her, gently touching her cheek. "Sweetheart, can you hear me?" Her lips parted slightly, and a faint whisper came out, a sound he had waited months to hear. "Daddy." The room filled with quiet gasps. The nurse covered her mouth in awe. The father broke down completely, holding her tiny hand and sobbing into it. "I'm here, my angel. I'm here." For a long moment, everything else disappeared. The pain, the sleepless nights, the fear. All that mattered was that his daughter was alive. Later, when the excitement calmed, the father rushed out to find the homeless girl. He wanted to tell her, to thank her, to show her the miracle she had brought. But once again, she was gone. He searched the hospital grounds, the streets nearby, even the small park across the road, but there was no sign of her. No one had seen her enter or leave. It was as if she had simply vanished. A few days later, his daughter was moved from the ICU to a recovery room. She was weak but awake, smiling faintly, speaking softly, her eyes full of life again. The doctors still couldn't understand how it happened. "We did everything we could medically," one of them said, "but something beyond medicine brought her back." The father knew exactly what that something was. One afternoon, as his daughter rested, he sat by the hospital window, lost in thought. The sky outside was painted orange with the setting sun. Suddenly, his daughter spoke in a weak but clear, "Pues, Daddy, who was the girl who came to see me?" He froze. "What girl, sweetheart?" "The one who sat beside me," she said, her eyes looking distant like she was remembering something. She had long hair and a soft voice. "She told me not to be afraid. She said you were waiting for me." His heart skipped a beat. "When did you see her?" he asked softly. "She came every night," the little girl whispered. "When everything was quiet. She held my hand and told me stories about light and kindness. She said I should wake up because my daddy still needed me." Tears filled his eyes. He couldn't speak. He just nodded slowly, his heart overwhelmed with gratitude and wonder. That night, he walked outside once more, standing near the same tree. He looked up at the sky and whispered, "Thank you, whoever you are." The wind blew softly, rustling the leaves above him. For a brief second, he thought he saw a faint figure at the far end of the path, the outline of a girl, her long hair moving with the breeze, her face peaceful. And then, just like before, she was gone. He didn't chase after her. He didn't need to. Deep down, he finally understood. Some miracles don't come with explanations. Some angels don't need wings. And sometimes, the most broken souls are sent to heal others. He looked up again, his eyes wet but full of peace, whispering one last time, "Thank you for giving me my daughter back." The days passed, and the father's daughter grew stronger. Her tiny voice became clearer, her smiles brighter, and soon she was able to sit up and speak full sentences. The father watched her closely, amazed at how quickly life had returned to her. Doctors called it a miracle, but he knew it was more than that. It was the mysterious homeless girl who had given his daughter the gift of hope, and maybe even life. Even as his daughter recovered, he couldn't stop thinking about her. Who was she? How had she known his daughter? And why did she appear only at the right moments, vanish without a trace, and never ask for anything in return? The curiosity grew inside him every day. One afternoon, he asked the hospital security guard again, "Please, I need to know if anyone has seen her recently." A young girl, poor clothes, sitting near the garden. The guard shook his head. "Sir, no one has seen her for days. Maybe she moved somewhere else." He sighed, frustration and concern mixing together. He wanted to find her, not just to thank her, but to understand. She wasn't an ordinary girl. He could feel it deep in his bones. That evening, he decided to visit the place where he first met her, a quiet street corner near the hospital, usually crowded with vendors and small shops. He walked slowly, his eyes scanning every shadow, every corner. And then, just as the sun began to set, he saw her sitting under a streetlight, folding her small blanket. "Finally," he whispered, almost running toward her. She looked up calmly. "You came," she said simply. "I had to," he replied, his voice heavy with emotion. "I can't thank you enough for what you did for my daughter. She's alive because of you." The girl shook her head. "It wasn't me alone," she said softly. "Your love and your belief were always there. I just reminded her, helped her remember." He frowned. "Helped her remember? What do you mean?" She paused, then spoke carefully. "Some hearts forget how strong they are when they're scared." She forgot how much she was loved, how much life was waiting for her. I just reminded her, gently, quietly. He looked at her, trying to understand. There was something more she wasn't saying. He leaned closer, voice low. "Who are you? Really? Where did you come from?" As she walked away, the father called out, "Will I see you again?" She paused, looking back. "Maybe. But remember, miracles happen when you believe, even when you don't see them. Never stop believing." And then she disappeared into the streets, like a shadow blending with the evening light. The father stood there, holding the folded blanket she had left behind once again. It was more than a piece of cloth. It was a reminder of hope, faith, and the kindness of a stranger who had changed his life forever. That night, he returned to his daughter's room. She was awake, playing with a small toy he had brought her. She looked up and said, "Daddy, will she come back?" He smiled softly, placing the blanket on her bed. "I don't know, sweetheart. But what I do know is this. Some people touch our lives in ways we cannot forget, and some miracles stay with us forever." The father realized then that life had given him a second chance, not just with his daughter, but with understanding what truly mattered. Money, power, and control had never brought him happiness, but love, faith, and kindness, even from a stranger, had. And somewhere in the quiet streets, the homeless girl walked on. She had given life, hope, and courage to those who needed it most, and that was enough. The days that followed were filled with quiet miracles. The billionaire's daughter grew stronger each day. Her smiles became brighter, her laughter more frequent, and her tiny hands were once again full of energy. Doctors were amazed at her recovery, but the father knew the real miracle had come from someone unexpected, the homeless girl who had touched their lives so deeply. One sunny morning, the father sat by his daughter's bedside, watching her play with a small stuffed toy. "You're doing so well, my angel," he said softly. "I can't believe how strong you've become." She looked up at him, her eyes sparkling. "Daddy, I remember everything. The girl who prayed for me. She helped me wake up," he smiled and nodded. "Yes, she did. She gave you hope when everything seemed lost." The little girl paused, her small brow furrowing. "Daddy, will I see her again?" He hesitated, remembering how she had vanished after every visit. Then he said, "I don't know, sweetheart. But maybe some people are meant to appear in our lives just once to teach us something important." His daughter thought for a moment and nodded slowly. "Then I'll never forget her," she whispered. Over the next few weeks, life slowly returned to normal. The father spent more time with his daughter, sharing stories, playing games, and making up for all the lost moments. He realized that money and power could never replace the warmth of family, the joy of laughter, or the comfort of being together. Even so, he couldn't forget the girl who had changed everything. One afternoon, he decided to do something. He went to the streets near the hospital where he had first met her. He searched every corner, every bench, every streetlight, hoping to find her, to thank her one last time. Hours passed, but there was no sign of her. Just when he was about to give up, he noticed a small figure walking quietly in the distance. She was barefoot, her hair blowing gently in the wind, her eyes calm and serene. He ran toward her. "Please wait," he called. She stopped and turned to look at him, her face gentle and kind. "I wanted to thank you," he said, his voice full of emotion. "You saved my daughter. You gave her life back. And you reminded me what truly matters. I can never repay you." The girl smiled softly. "You don't need to repay me," she said. "Just remember to always believe in love, hope, and kindness. That is the greatest gift of all." He wanted to offer her a home, a life of comfort, anything she wanted, but she shook her head. "My path is different. I come to those who need me most, and then I move on. That's my way." He nodded, understanding at last. Some people were sent to guide others, not to stay forever. She was one of those people. Before leaving, she knelt slightly and touched his hand. "Remember this," she whispered. "Life is fragile, but hope is stronger. Never forget that." With that, she walked away, fading into the city streets, leaving behind only the small folded blanket he had come to cherish. It was a symbol of faith, love, and the extraordinary power of one person to change another's life. Back at home, the father watched his daughter sleep peacefully. He held her hand and whispered softly, "We are lucky, my little one. Truly lucky." He reflected on the lessons he had learned over the past weeks. Life could be unpredictable and harsh, but even in the darkest moments there was light. Even in despair, hope could appear in the most unexpected form. And sometimes it came from someone who had nothing, yet gave everything. From that day on, the father lived differently. He spent less time worrying about business, wealth, or status. Instead, he devoted himself to his daughter, to helping others in need, and to spreading kindness whenever possible. He knew that the true measure of a person was not money, but the love and compassion they shared with the world. Years later, he would tell his daughter the story of the homeless girl, how she had appeared like an angel during the darkest time of their lives, how her quiet faith had awakened hope, and how her presence had changed everything. And his daughter would listen, eyes wide with wonder, knowing that miracles could happen when you least expected them. The father never saw the girl again, but he never forgot her. Her lesson stayed with him forever, a reminder that even a small act of kindness, even a whisper of hope, could change a life completely. And so, life went on, brighter and fuller than before. The daughter grew up healthy and happy, surrounded by love, and the father never forgot the girl who had taught him that the greatest miracles come from the heart. Sometimes, when he walked past the streets where she had appeared, he thought he saw a shadow moving quietly in the distance, and he smiled, knowing that somewhere out there, she continued to bring hope to those who needed it most, because some people are sent to change the world, quietly, humbly, and without asking for anything in return, and sometimes that is all it takes to make life extraordinary. The end years had passed since that extraordinary moment in the hospital. The little girl who had once been in a coma was now growing into a bright, joyful child, full of life and laughter. Her father watched her every day, feeling a gratitude that no amount of wealth could ever repay. Though life had returned to normal in appearance, it had changed profoundly in the heart. The billionaire no longer measured success by business deals or profits. Instead, he measured it by moments of kindness, family time, and the small ways he could make the world better for someone else. He often told his daughter the story of the mysterious homeless girl, the stranger who had appeared at the perfect time, who had believed when others had given up, and who had given hope when all seemed lost. The girl's identity remained a mystery, but her lessons were unforgettable. "Daddy," his daughter asked one evening, as they watched the sunset from their balcony, "do you think we'll ever see her again?" The father smiled softly. "Maybe we will. Or maybe she's out there helping someone else just like she helped you. Some people are sent to change lives and then move on." His daughter nodded thoughtfully. "I want to be like her when I grow up." That made him pause. "Like her? What do you mean?" "I want to help people even when no one notices. I want to give hope just like she gave me," she said, eyes shining with determination. The father felt a wave of emotion. In that moment, he realized that the miracle wasn't just his daughter waking up. The true miracle was the seed of kindness and hope that the homeless girl had planted in both their hearts. That seed had grown into something larger than life, something that would continue to touch others for years to come. He began dedicating more time to helping the less fortunate, creating programs for children in need, shelters for those without homes, and opportunities for people who had lost hope. Every act reminded him of the girl who had walked into their lives without asking for anything in return. And though he never saw her again, sometimes late at night he would think he saw a figure in the distance, standing quietly, smiling and fading away into the darkness. He knew it was her in some way, a reminder that hope never really leaves. His daughter, now stronger and healthier than ever, often carried a small notebook where she wrote stories about kindness, miracles, and people who make the world brighter. One day she titled a story, "The Girl Who Gave Me Life." The father read it and felt a lump in his throat. "You'll never forget her, will you?" he asked softly. "I could never forget," she replied. "She taught us that even the smallest acts of love can change everything." Together they often shared stories with others, spreading hope wherever they went. And in quiet moments, he would glance at the city streets and silently thank the girl who had changed their lives forever. He had learned something important. Miracles don't always come in grand, visible ways. Sometimes they come in whispers, in the faith of a stranger, in the belief that love can overcome despair. And sometimes, the greatest gifts in life are invisible, but their effects last a lifetime. As the father held his daughter close that night, he promised himself one thing. He would honor the lesson the girl had given them. He would live a life of kindness, courage, and hope, and he would teach his daughter to do the same. And somewhere, out there in the world, a young girl walked on, unseen but unforgettable, leaving hope in her path and reminding the world that even one person's heart could change lives forever.